Unlike other anime, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a constantly changing series of individual stories, each connected by the Joestar lineage, but independent in characters, setting, and even genre. The dynamic nature of the series means that in every part, Araki is able to completely shift the tone to align with his current interests and personality, along with the nature of pop culture as a whole. With this ability to evolve, each arc of the story sees unprecedented growth. While the characters, plot, and themes of Phantom Blood are fairly one-dimensional, each part provides new depth in a particular area, which allows the series to constantly expand and improve. That being said, today, I hope to make the case that Golden Wind is the high point of all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Many will argue that Giorno not only lacks the depth and lovability to be the greatest JoJo, but would even place him at the bottom of the list. And this isn't without reason. Giorno does not take center stage in his part nearly as much as other protagonists, and furthermore, he lacks his own unique traits or idiosyncrasies that often make Araki's protagonists so special. While Jonathan Joestar is fairly straightforward, there isn't a single episode that revolves around any other character more than him. And other JoJos do find themselves alongside a more developed cast of supporting characters, but they each have their own unique traits that allow them to stand out to the viewer. Joseph Joestar is cunning in a way that other characters of the series are not, which is emphasized by his battlefield predictions of what his opponents will say, along with his infamous Joestar secret technique, which shows off his humor, even in the face of perilous circumstances. Jotaro's stoic and rebellious attitude contrasts with the caring and emotionally open nature of his fellow protagonists. Josuke has a loyalty for those around him that he expresses more openly than his other counterparts, and his defensive nature regarding his hairdo is a unique flaw that sets him apart from other heroes. Jolene is rebellious and defined not by her morals, but by the mission she sets out on. She is tough when interacting with enemies and new characters, but her struggles are very open to the viewer and feel far more raw and grounded than those of the other Joestars. This is something that Giorno lacks. He is constantly overshadowed by supporting characters, follows the standard archetype of a calm, stoic, and morally driven protagonist, and lacks a particular idiosyncrasy that makes him a memorable hero. That being said, the fairly straightforward nature of Giorno allows him to act as a central point around which other characters have the space necessary to individually shine, which creates a well-rounded team. Each member of Bucciarati's team, including Bucciarati himself, has a personal and extensive backstory, a set of individual quirks, and a power that feels unique to that individual. Stardust Crusaders was the first part to introduce a real set of JoBros, or companions that follow the protagonist on their journey with their own individual motives, powers, and dynamics with one another. While the Crusaders are in many ways the most popular and beloved of the JoBros, they still lack depth. Avdol's backstory is exclusive to his profession and an encounter he had with Dio, and his stand is painfully underutilized in combat. Kokuin had a glorious and memorable final moment, but until then, his character left much to be desired. Both of these characters had so much potential, but despite this, neither were given many opportunities to grow as characters. Other than their goals of defeating Dio, it was very hard to gauge anything at all about their motivations. Joseph and Polnareff are exceptions in this case. Joseph was already thoroughly developed in battle tendency, and Polnareff did, in fact, have his own unique motivation and growth throughout the part, joining the team initially with just the goal of avenging his sister's death, but growing fond of other team members and slowly becoming a less shallow and more lovable person overall. Diamond is Unbreakable begins to show more well-rounded characters with the likes of Okuyasu and Koichi. However, the other, more minor members of the ensemble, those being the other citizens of Morio that the characters meet along their journey, are only given one small plot each in which to show off their individual traits, and from then on are only shown in the background. These parts heavily contrast Golden Wind, where each member of Bucciarati's team is given their own unique backstory, subplots, and character traits. Bucciarati's calm yet protective nature, slow sacrifice on behalf of Trish and his team, and even his unique tendency to touch his face when deep in thought, make him a tragic yet inspirational leader. Abbacchio's meticulousness and skepticism provide a different point of view from what we're used to from supporting casts. Mista's idiosyncratic relationship with Sex Pistols makes for many fun interactions, and his superstition towards the number 4 is seemingly a flaw that constantly negatively affects his attitude, but is inevitably a theme with a heavy impact on the story. Laurentia's cheery outlook balances out the cynicism of other team members, and he provides a good contrast of vulnerability regarding his intelligence with courage and recklessness in physical confrontation. Fugo lacks the loyalty to the team possessed by the other members, and instead feels he must strongly adhere to rules. His overwhelming intelligence and volatility creates for a dangerous combination. Finally, Trish starts with a lack of confidence that she is slowly able to fill, using her stand, Spice Girl, as a close confidant. a stand and stand-user relationship that is exclusive to her character. These traits that define each of the team members set them apart from the standard archetypes that secondary protagonists are often forced to fill in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Additionally, while other parts develop characters almost exclusively through their interactions with the main protagonist, due to the fact that Giorno is initially an outsider to an existing team, there is space for focus on internal dynamics between other team members. Abbacchio's loyalty and love for Bucciarati in particular, despite his hostility and closed-off nature toward others, allows the two of them to have a special and inevitably tragic connection. Fugo and Narantia, despite their opposing personalities, had a closeness that often devolved into petty conflict. That being said, the two clearly cared for each other and had a deep relationship akin to that of an older and younger sibling. And while Trish and Mista initially experienced tension, the two became closer and closer despite their initial squabbles. These relationships and interactions that we see between secondary cast members humanize them in ways that few other relationships do across the series. While relationships between JoBros like Jotaro and Koichi or Polnareff and Iggy may develop in much the same way, they are exceptions in their parts, while these dynamics are a given between just about every member of Bucciarati's team. Just as Golden Wind allows a large ensemble of minor protagonists to be developed thoroughly, it does the same with its antagonists, allowing for a complex network of conflicts and motives between major and minor villains alike. This arc has by far the most engaging and complex cast of minor antagonists of any JoJo part. The assassination team, led by Risotto, is motivated by a desire to find and eliminate their boss. Because of this, as the protagonists slowly turn against Diavolo, the general contention is no longer simply one team against another, but rather three individual groups with their own conflicting motives. This dynamic is entirely unique to this part of JoJo. It's one thing to have a minor antagonist question or attack the main villain, such as in the case of Whole Horse confronting Dio, but for something as significant as the leader of the assassination team to go head-to-head with Doppio in arguably the most exciting fight of the arc is entirely unheard of in the rest of the anime. This unique dynamic between enemy parties adds an additional complexity to Golden Wind. Not only is the assassination team in Golden Wind unique in its dynamic with the protagonist and primary villain, it is unique in terms of its structure. While parts 1, 2, and 4 follow, for the most part, a journey to defeat a singular antagonist, or, in the case of part 4, one antagonist at a time, with the occasional one-off forgettable encounter, and parts 3 and 6 revolving around conflict with a single major villain who has bestowed stand powers to a series of one-off lackeys who the main team must defeat sequentially in order to defeat their final battle, the Assassination Squad in part 5 is a predefined and pre-developed team of characters who the viewer slowly learns about as an entire group. While the main antagonists in other parts are introduced one at a time, the assassination team is slowly revealed as a whole, providing more information to the viewer about the team in small chunks. This allows viewers to be given clues regarding the powers and dynamics of members before meeting them, which makes the fights significantly more exciting, as it no longer feels as though each conflict is an isolated event. On top of this, the backstory regarding the Assassination Squad means that there's a sense of cohesion among minor villains that doesn't exist with Dio's followers or inmates granted power by Pucci. While it is certainly fun to be surprised by new stand users and their respective powers one at a time, when continually done it can feel repetitive and each encounter can feel unearned in comparison to Golden Wind's assassination team members, who already have clear motives and relationships prior to their individual introductions. When all the antagonists are laid out in front of you and given clear motivation, you are expecting and excited for each one. On top of this, while not as popular as Dio or as interesting and grounded as Kira, the dynamic between Diavolo and Doppio provides a unique and thrilling aspect for the conflict. Not only this, but it adds a layer of unpredictability to the character that intensifies the aura of mystery in this part. The enigmatic nature of Diavolo in the first half of this part is perfectly complemented by the struggle that is created by the nature of Diavolo and Doppio, and the way in which their stand, King Crimson, complements this is nothing less than exceptional. So this is a topic I'll talk about more in a different section. Stands are one of the defining features of Part 3 onwards in JoJo, and Golden Wind makes exceptional use of them. Upon their introduction in Part 3, stands are almost entirely combat-oriented. The only notable exception to this rule is Hermit Purple, a stand used for gathering information that Joseph is able to utilize for combat and mobility in special cases. While this can make for exciting fights, it often means that stands fail to feel as though they match the unique personality of their user. This is something that significantly improves in Part 4 onward. When we are introduced to stand users in Morio, many of them are simple small-town citizens whose powers aid in their profession. And even when stands are largely combat-oriented, they relate to the unique personality of a character. Yukako's hair stand, for example, emulates her initial archetype of the beautiful, perfect girl. And the way in which she uses her stand to brutally harm others while trapping Koichi mirrors her violent temper and obsessive nature. This reflection that stands have to their users' distinct identities makes them really feel like an extension of that person, rather than simply a tool for combat. Part 5 is able to perfect this idea. Despite all of the members of Bucciarotti's team being Mafia members who frequently find themselves in combat, their abilities have a variety of specifications that balance out the team, which often means that members are playing off of one another's abilities instead of fighting solo. Mista and Fugo both clearly have combat-oriented abilities, but while Mista's is used for precision targeting, Fugo's is meant for widespread destruction. While Narantia's stand does have a clear capacity for damage, its main use is reconnaissance, given its ability to identify life signs within a given area. Abakio's stand is used to gather information about past events within a particular location. And Bucciarotti's Sticky Fingers is a generalist that can be used for extensive purposes due to Bucciarotti's cunning. Namely, it's used to enable traversal through barriers and difficult terrain, and for assisting in combat to alter his body to his advantage or his opponents to put them at a disadvantage. These abilities relate to their users' individual idiosyncrasies, and more importantly, they each cover different specializations so that the group can work as a cohesive team, playing off of each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. It's not only the stands that are possessed by Bucciarotti's team that are interesting and unique. Giorno and Diavolo have arguably the most interesting stands of any JoJo and primary villain. Golden Experience has the ability to endow inanimate and animate objects alike with life. These newly created life forms can reflect damage back on attackers. Given the unique nature of this stand, despite its physical weakness compared to previous JoJo stands like Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond, it can be used for a plethora of purposes, from creating new, working body parts to tracking the location of these created life forms. The huge variety of abilities at his disposal, combined with Golden Experience's nature as, first and foremost, a support stand, allow Giorno to aid the team while letting other members occupy the foreground, which plays into how he lets his team individually shine and each be thoroughly developed. Diavolo, on the other hand, has a stand completely centered around unassisted combat, which is perfect for his isolationist and individualistic nature. King Crimson, on top of being the name of my favorite band, is without a doubt my favorite stand in all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. While it is a clear trend for main villains to have stand powers that revolve around time, it does this in the most innovative and frightening way of any stand. King Crimson consists of two parts. The small stand on its head is Epitaph, which grants the user the ability to see 10 seconds into the future. The main body is King Crimson itself, able to bypass the foreseen 10 seconds. If this power is used, the actions and movements of others are preset during this time, and will occur just as Epitaph predicted. However, Diavolo is free to move however he pleases during this time, the only restriction being that for the 10 seconds he is not allowed to harm anyone. He can use this to position himself in an ideal striking position, and when time is up, King Crimson can eliminate a target in a single strike. Finally, after the 10 seconds are complete, everyone except Diavolo will become unaware of the events of that time. It is for this reason that he considers himself to be erasing a period of time. This erasure of time allows him to remain unseen and strike from the shadows, appealing to his secretive nature. And unlike other time-based stands, the restriction means that he's beatable as long as his opponent understands his power and can effectively predict where he might move in the stopped time. This is in stark contrast to Dio, whose power is unbeatable unless his opponent also coincidentally can stop time, given that he can freely attack and kill others during this stopped time. Kira faces a similar problem. While his time-based power was beaten, it was only because he underestimated the intelligence of Hayato and was tricked. There would have been nothing that any of the main protagonists could have done to defeat Bites the Dust, had Hayato not done what he did. While King Crimson is extremely powerful, Diavolo needs to use it intelligently to kill and remain hidden, and if his opponents are smart and capable enough, they can circumvent it. This may be, in my opinion, where Golden Wind shines the most. Many of the previous and subsequent parts have plots that are extremely straightforward in nature, and Golden Wind subverts this. Parts 1 to 3, along with Part 6, all identify a clear antagonist early on, and simply revolve around the JoJo along with a few JoBros slowly making their way to a final showdown with that antagonist. Part 4 was the first to begin subverting this by introducing several smaller incremental goals. First, the protagonists learn that something awful is in Morio and confront Angelo. Then, they learn of the arrow and must hunt down the Nijimura brothers. Then, Akira comes into the possession of the arrow and creates new stand users. Finally, the true evil of the town, Kira, is revealed to the viewers, and the primary plot becomes discovering his identity and stopping him. While this series of sequential plots adds another layer of intricacy to Diamond is Unbreakable, it is abundantly clear that this is not a technique that Araki has mastered during the writing of this part. There are multiple plots, both major and minor, that are introduced and then quickly dropped without thorough exploration. Upon its establishment in the story, there is so much mystery around the origin of the arrow, but it is quickly dropped and the arrow just becomes a catalyst for creation of more and more minor antagonists for Josuke and his friends to encounter. When first introduced, the entire motivation for the Nijimura brothers is curing or killing their father, and while Josuke vows to help cure him, this plot is quickly forgotten without any additional developments or resolution. Arguably the most blatant example of this, though, is that of the Invisible Baby, who is introduced and given her own episode, and then never again referenced or given further development, despite now being a Joestar with an interesting stand power. These notable plot points, which are introduced and never again mentioned, leave a lot to be wanted in Diamond is Unbreakable. And this is an element that Golden Wind greatly improves upon. Like Diamond is Unbreakable, the plot is regularly shifting. But unlike its predecessor, it is not simply the new mission appears when the last one has been completed or new information comes to light. What makes the plot of Golden Wind so interesting is that the objective of the story is constantly in motion based on the fluctuating morals, motives, and knowledge possessed by the protagonists. The story begins with Giorno and his aversion to the sale of drugs to minors by gangs. After fighting and killing Leaky Eye Luca, he is attacked by Bucciarati, both of whom come to respect one another. Bucciarati shares Giorno's outlook, and the two team up. Giorno and Bucciarati's team recover Pulpo's treasure along with Trish, and are tasked with bringing her to the boss. It is at this point where the motives of the characters begin to have a major impact on the shifting goals in the plot. When Bucciarati realizes that the boss intends to kill Trish, he saves her, betraying the organization to which he belongs, and from here, the entire tone of the arc changes. In JoJo, up until Golden Wind, we have clear senses of good and bad. The protagonists have a clearly good motivation from the start, while the villain is usually in pursuit of either power in most cases or simply lust in the case of Part 4. Golden Wind, on the other hand, shows characters who each have inherent flaws. The protagonists are not straight-shooting good guys in this part, but rather, they are career killers and members of a mafia. That being said, they each have their own morals that dictate their actions. Morals that influence how their goals and decisions throughout the arc are made, and morals which will inevitably cause this abrupt shift in purpose that Bucciarati's team undergoes. While other arcs all have some noble end goal, parts 1 and 2 following protagonists hoping to save humanity from either the vampires or the Pillar Men, part 3 following Jotaro hoping to save his mother's life from Dio, part 4 following Josuke and his friends trying to save their town from a mass murderer, and part 6 following Jolene trying to escape her unjust prison sentence, and eventually trying to prevent Pucci's plan to reset humanity entirely. Golden Wind, however, does not have nearly such a noble end goal. Giorno and Bucciarati's team wishes to become the heads of a mafia family, and while Giorno's motives to do this may be positive, those being to prevent the flow of drugs to minors, he and the team still take abhorrent means to get to this only marginally better end. Team members willingly torture their enemies, and even attack innocent civilians. This morally grey nature of our protagonists adds a layer of complexity to Part 5 not possessed by other arcs. While every other arc simply revolves around a set of characters with predefined morals and goals, Part 6 shows individuals who are heavily flawed but experience gradual shifts in their morality and goals based on the information that is revealed to them and the experiences that they undergo. Golden Wind may not have the same place in popular culture as Stardust Crusaders. The setting within the ranks of an Italian mafia is not nearly as lovable as the quaint town of Morio, and the end goal of seeing Giorno become a mafia don is not nearly as cosmic in scale as saving humanity from a total reset. But Part 5 is, and always will be, a masterclass in how to develop an extensive cast of interesting characters, use the stand power system in innovative and unique ways, and show a gradual shift in motivations and goals across an entire story. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is an ever-changing series, with each part providing a new setting, ensemble, and set of powers, and Golden Wind perfectly embodies the dynamic nature of the series, be it the morality of its protagonists, the dynamics between major and minor characters alike, or the knowledge of the Mafia syndicate possessed by the viewer. Golden Wind is as exciting, fast-paced, and constantly fresh as the entire show aspires to be, while pushing the storytelling of its predecessors up a notch. It is for this reason that Golden Wind is, currently, the best part of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure anime.